Thank you for coming. This is a small group, so let's try to keep it interactive. I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll get going. We only have 30 minutes. Let's start with James.
Good morning, everyone. My name is James Britchford, and I'm Vice President Commercial for India, Middle East and Africa for IHG Hotels and Resorts.
Bani?
Morning, my name is Bani Haddad. I'm the Managing Director of Aleph Hospitality. We are an independent hotel operator, active in the Middle East and Africa. And we currently run about 12 hotels with another 15 in the pipeline.
And Oliver, please.
Good morning. Hi, my name is Oliver Judge. I'm Director of Asset Management at the Red Sea Development Company.
So we have an operator, an asset manager, a lawyer, and an agnostic in the middle, a third-party manager here. I think we all know the pros about loyalty programs that you hear of, far more direct bookings, reduced OTA costs, greater repeat stays, lower marketing costs for trying to get repeat customers rather than new customers, average higher ADR and spend by loyalty programs, the data mining opportunities that the loyalty programs and the know your guest opportunities create, increased corporate loyalty business. But on the cons, the administrative costs of marketing and running these programs, the effectively 4.5% of revenue, folio cost, which is pretty close to what you pay in management fees. For example, if you had a 2% base and 8% incentive fee, at a 40% GOP, that comes to 5.2%. So these loyalty programs are not cheap. It's almost a second management fee that wasn't there 10 or 15 years ago. Potentially giving away services and displacing revenues that guests might have already paid for, skewering customer behavior away from what is the best product to who offers the best loyalty program or where are my points, potentially displacing paying guests, the inequity to hotels that are less desirable, that are net contributors to the program but never get any redemptions. It's often an easy way to address customer complaints, just give them more benefits. And there's often a lack of consistency amongst reward programs between hotels. And then finally, what I find, and if I can be ethnically incorrect, I find this with American guests, there's this incredible sense of entitlement that they're a loyalty program, they think they're the owner, and they want all these things for free. So based on that, let's start with James as the operator. Building on my comments about the potential win-win, how do you manage these programs, addressing the costs of these programs to owners, and make this a net profitability win for the owner?
Everything we do at IHG always has to have a guest lens on it and an owner lens on it. And from the loyalty perspective, loyalty is absolutely critical. And I can only quote what's been happening through the pandemic and post the pandemic. Through the pandemic, the first guests that were through our doors were our loyalty members. And that's just a fact. Bearing in mind, 50% of our guests around the world are loyalty members in our hotels. We know full well the criticality of loyalty and how important it is. And I think you covered most of the pros, Scott, in your introduction, so you've stolen some of my argument. But ultimately, if you had to simplify it, our loyalty members stay more, they pay more, and at IHG, we do analytics on it, and it's in excess of 20% on what they spend, not just on their room rate, but on their total spend in-house. And the other thing that's important that doesn't get discussed enough is they say more on social channels. Now, sometimes it is the demanding ones that you paid reference to, but in the majority, it's brand advocates for you that are talking through social channels that are so important to you, that drives that brand equity. And strategically, IHG is investing in its hotel program. We were the first to bring a hotel loyalty program in. I believe it was in 1983.
1983, yes. But were you charging for that back then, or was that part of central services?
Part of central services to begin with, but it's obviously evolved to a paid-for service. But we've done this because our guests, and I think it was said in this morning's session in the main stage, they are looking not just at a product, but also a loyalty offering to make sure that you are a brand of choice.
Oliver, as an asset manager, how, and perhaps in looking at brands, how do you value the various programs when considering an operator for a hotel? And then how do you attempt to manage the costs, the cons of this, to make this a net profitability benefit for the hotel?
Sure. I think there's really two main kind of prongs of attack here, if you like. As a kind of day-to-day asset manager, I'm thinking about how I can work with the hotel teams to make the loyalty programs really work for that particular property. So you're having regular conversations with the general manager, the revenue management team, the sales team. Like, there are angles within these programs that you can activate, whether you're opting in, opting out, being part of and promoting your property as part of a kind of brand-wide promotion with some of the marketing initiatives that come through the loyalty programs. Or it could be about making sure the property is being strategic about how they're highlighting the point angle for a new corporate account or a national account, for example. So what's important is that you have these dialogues with the property level teams and ensure that there isn't just a one-size-fits-all approach. We're not just taking the kind of cookie cutter, this is best practice for all of the branded hotels. We're trying to make it a more bespoke model to activate the elements that are the biggest plus, because there are clearly advantages of leveraging the loyalty programs, and then being mindful of what those costs are associated with them and looking for angles where you can, like I said, possibly opt out, possibly look for managing your inventory in terms of how much standard room categories you have versus premiums. Are the front desk just automatically upgrading every high category member, or are they being thoughtful about how they can yield the hotel most effectively? So there are certainly lots of angles that you need to be very cognizant of to really drive the profitability and really maintain that ownership focus.
This sounds like you really need to have significant training on the sales team, revenue management team, and front desk team.
There's certainly it's a complex topic because each of these parts of the hotel have very sophisticated programs and levers that they can pull, and these are very specialist team members that dedicate their careers to these particular departments. So from an ownership perspective, you're using the asset management expertise to maintain that dialogue. And then just taking a step back, whether you're part of a larger ownership group or whether you want to drive the conversations through an organization such as HAMA, you may be having more global conversations in terms of, are there broader topics that we can look to adjust with whether that's, you can see over recent years how there's been the introduction of additional tiers for the redemption rewards, for example, whether that's mechanism of occupancy or a mechanism of so many redemption room nights, for example. So I think that you're having two kinds of conversations, the kind of the detailed day-to-day conversations to drive that property level profitability, and then having more wholesale conversations with the corporate teams to see, like, fundamentally, are there adjustments that we should be thinking about making to ultimately benefit not only the owner's profitability, but maintain the brand integrity and the awareness.
Now, Bani, as the third-party agnostic, I know your pitch as a third-party operator is that I don't work for the brand, I work for you, the owner. So in your assessment of these programs, how do you address the profitability side of these and manage them? Do you think you have a little more independence than if it was the manager of a branded hotel
So,
to control this?
yeah, we do work for the owners. We secure franchises like an IHG franchise. And when we secure the franchise, we run a brand selection. And one of the aspects we look into is the loyalty program strength. Because as an operator, I would rather pay 4 or 5% to the loyalty program than paying 18 or 20% to the OTA. The challenges, I think, of the loyalty schemes is not all loyalty schemes are equal. Not all properties are equal, and we, in many cases, see that in certain locations, the loyalty scheme is not really adding any value because the guests have no choice. You know, in certain destinations, the guests have no choice; they have to go there. But as an operator, I still have to pay for these loyalty schemes. From a brand perspective, I completely understand it. It's a one-size-fits-all. From an operator-owner perspective, I tend to disagree. Not one-size-fits-all. So we try to put this in our evaluation criteria, whether we really need a brand or we don't need a brand for each one of our properties. So some of the properties we run don't have a brand because the cost of having a brand does not make sense. But talking about the future, since this is
When you're doing this brand analysis selection, is the loyalty scheme high on the list of?
It is, because it's a big, listen, I mean, no one can deny the benefits of the loyalty schemes. As James mentioned, I mean, they spend more, they stay more, the commissions are less, perfect. So there's no question about it. But, going in, if you look at I don't know, how many members do you have? 120 million, 130 million? I'm not sure.
Just over 130 million. Yeah.
130 million. But the real question is how many are active? And from the active ones, how many do accumulate enough points to spend? And what happens to these, very little, the guys who travel once, twice a year, but they're still counted as members? So what happens to these? And I think the future of the loyalty scheme, because if you look at many studies, the new enrollment, especially for the younger generation, is going down. And how do you engage them? One of the ways is probably to allow these users to spend the 5,000 miles that they have or points on Starbucks or, I don't know, supermarket or coffee somewhere. So basically have a real engagement with this new generation. But also, I don't know how you guys are dealing with the OTAs who now have very strong loyalty programs.
I think that's what the interesting thing is. We're talking about loyalty programs, and clearly any loyalty program comes with a cost. So if you're talking to Booking.com, they know that they'd rather get their business without a loyalty program, without Genius, because then they wouldn't have to offer the 10% discount to everyone. But the reality is, without a loyalty program, they are going to have a major challenge on their hands. From our perspective, we know that business comes through very, very different channels, and you have different segments and different needs for loyalty members, which is why, with the launch of IHG One Rewards, which is our new loyalty program, we've included another tier. Because what we're trying to do is to work with our owners, because this program was built in partnership with our Global Owners Association, to make sure that, yes, we're attracting people to our brands through the entry-level membership, but we're also creating bigger increments across particularly the top tiers, because they're the guests that we want staying in our hotels. So we really are trying to create something that's enticing for the consumer, but also has the owner lens on it as well.
But so I was just giving an example to Scott. There's an OTA platform. I'm not going to name it. They offer consumers, guests, points whenever they buy. So I buy a room night at Hilton. I buy a room night at IHG. I buy a room night at an unbranded hotel, and I still accumulate points. And then I can go and spend them anywhere I want. And
so it's like cash accumulating.
It's like cash, and I think that's the big challenge that you guys have. and you need to address. And for me, the way to address it is, how can you engage with the consumer directly from an emotional perspective also? It's not only about the points.
Absolutely, it's not only about the points, and the OTAs will keep us on our toes. There's no doubt about it at all. What I can say is in the last year that we have got 9 million more members, so we're not seeing the slowdown in terms of enrolments. And the other thing that we will always have over the OTAs, which is where, listening to Oliver, it's how you bring it to life on property. Because you can be a member with any OTA, but what you can't do is get that kind of guest experience on property where you are getting the recognition, where you feel like you can be treated as an individual, where you can get particular about your stay, saying, actually, I'd like a soft pillow, not a firm pillow. I'd like to be on the top floor, not the bottom floor. These sorts of qualities, particularly in a market like the Middle East, is absolutely critical. And the strapline of our new loyalty program is 6,000 hotels operating in over 100 countries with 17 brands, but there's only one you. And it's a real balance between how can you achieve that to get what individuals want, which is why with the new loyalty program, to your point, they've got more options on how they redeem their points. If they don't want to stay in our hotels, that's fine. We have redemption partners so you can spend those points on somebody else. We even have a redemption partner in Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which are those small boutique hotels around the world where you can use your points to stay in those hotels. Because we know exactly, to your point, that the consumers are asking for different things and they want to use the points differently. Loyalty comes to life on property, and we see it in our hotels when you've got a great operations that are all over loyalty. They make sure that for that 4.5% they're paying, they make it work as hard as possible for them.
How do you appease those, say you're the Holiday Inn Samara, and I pay my 4.5%, Samara Russia, and I pay my 4.5%, and it's actually a decent hotel in Samara, and in the beach on the Volga River in the back on a sandy beach is quite a sight in the summer days. But it's not a place you're probably going to take your wife for your anniversary. So this is a net contributor, but they never get any of the upside, the redemptions, other than, you get customers.
I think it comes down to what we were discussing earlier on the feasibility. Do you need a brand or not? So for the operator or the owner-operator, they understand the benefits of joining a global hotel group versus what detracts to it. So there could be certain parts, certain developments that you guys are doing that you go, do you know what, I just don't think I need to put a brand on that because the value proposition that comes from a global hotel group just doesn't stack up for what I'm paying. And I think that's a very, very fair comment. What we do see is that every owner or indeed asset manager that we engage with has a different thing that they get excited about the IHG enterprise. Some it's all about the loyalty program. Others are like, not bothered about your loyalty program, it's your global sales coverage, and are you going to tap those customers that I can't tap because I'm in Samara or wherever I am. Some it's for the operational excellence because they want to sign a managed agreement, so they want IHG people in their hotels. So there is always, with every deal that we do, a different value to a different part of the IHG enterprise that's placed.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, I think much like any element of revenue management, sales, marketing, e-commerce, it's vital to look at every aspect with the lens of what's the return on investment. And this is a component of that. So I think whilst you may not be able to turn on and off every element of a loyalty program, you still need to be looking at it with that angle and with that mindset. In terms of what you were mentioning, Scott, there about is this in terms of a particular hotel? Is it a hotel that burns or earns? The kind of the classic phrase. But really, even if you're not in a location where you typically would get the kind of redemptions, you would still anticipate that the brand contribution to that property is kind of in and around that 50% as a kind of standard benchmark. That's definitely been my experience, and albeit more in US and Europe. So interesting how that evolves with the loyalty programs globally as well. But when it comes to redemption room nights, I think that's definitely a bit of a contentious point with ownership. I've seen it work very well. I've seen it work very badly. Much like anything, it has to be managed correctly. Certainly, there's a story working with a hotel, and historically that had been a property it was in Florida. It was a high redemption reward property, and over the years, it had almost become addicted to that part of the business. And instead of utilizing those redemption rewards to help boost business, it was flipped on its head, and it became almost a key strategy. And that's when it can go badly wrong. So you need that strength of the strength of that partnership between the ownership, the brand, the operating company, if there's a franchise involved. But it needs to be very clear about what's best for not just this one particular night, but the long-term underlying value for that asset, because it can go very badly wrong, and it's about the decisions being made. Like, you can't have a strategy which is all about just getting to that 96% threshold, and we've seen it in different markets where over time that's almost changed the dynamic of how these prices are introduced 30 days out, 7 days out, week of, day of arrival, and that's been, I think, a challenge for the industry as a whole. I think we've definitely got a lot smarter about that over the last several years, and I think moving forward, that's an opportunity where, from an ownership perspective, I'd certainly love the baseline redemptions to be higher.
Well, that's the thing you say, becoming addicted to the redemptions, but even at a high, if they tier them up based on what your occupancy is, that redemption is probably not what you'd get out on the market, is it? But close.
No, I think where it becomes more meaningful, there's two kind of prongs here. There's, first of all, you want to make sure that baseline redemption, it's not actually costing you money. You know, some of these hotels have very significant cost bases involved. So, you know, whilst it may drive top-line performance, it's not necessarily driving profitability. So that conversations needs to be had with the operator for sure. And then secondly, it's about identifying the periods, whether it's a high-profile event or, you know, a holiday weekend where you may have 10, 20+% of your hotel inventory through redemption rewards. And on those key nights, it becomes very vital for the hotel revenue management team to hit these key thresholds, because there can be a significant delta between what your hotel ADR is and what your redemption rate may be if you don't hit these kind of milestones. So, you know, I think you have to be thoughtful. It's not easy. These are not programs that you can just plug and play and leave to run themselves. You have to be hands-on. You need to be proactive, and you need to be strategic about how you deploy them.
We are looking to evolve the programs as well. Well, not looking, we are evolving it. So we've had blackouts before where there's been significant events where we obviously want to black that out. But what we also do now is have dynamic room nights, whereas before it had been, look, it's 50,000 points to stay in Intercontinental. Now our owners, our hotels, have the ability to lower or increase the number of points to stay in the hotel, which we launched actually during COVID, which allows our hotels, our owner partners, to have a little bit more control in terms of how many points it's going to cost to stay in the hotel.
I mean, yeah, there is a variety. I mean, Hyatt doesn't have blackouts. And then Marriott has off-peak, peak pricing for the points you use. And it sounds like that's what you're going to do. Any questions from the audience?
Can we come back on this, because we're talking about the redemption and mostly
yes.
Customer facing, and listen, I'm a big defender of the loyalty programs, right? But let's make it a little bit more interesting and take the owner's perspective, the investor's perspective. If I'm, an owner of a Holiday Inn here in Riyadh, and my company has a corporate agreement, and I have to stay at the Holiday Inn, and I have these guests coming, and I'm paying the 5% constantly for someone who has no choice. It's not about loyalty. It's someone who's mandating, and there are millions of these customers. Right? Don't you think that we should reach a point with the technology that exists today that if I'm a first-time or via corporate account, or where I really, the algorithm, knows that I have no choice. I'm coming here because there's a corporate contract, that instead of the 5% I'm paying, I should pay 2.5%,
I like it. You're mixing it up a little bit. I guess a couple of things. We have had situations with customers where we've explained it's a non-qualifying rate. So the negotiation has gone between the hotel and we said, this is non-qualifying, so you don't earn points. What tends to happen is they stay, and then they don't stay at property again because the individuals feel disgruntled. And then the other half of that is with programs that, particularly the bigger programs with the big corporate clients around the world, you're not usually one hotel in Riyadh. They'll contract 20 hotels in Riyadh. And if you don't have a loyalty scheme, you won't get your fair share. You could be successful in the RFP, but they will not stay with you because what happens is the individuals
Sorry, I
have
used
the choice.
Riyadh. Let's use it.
Are we back in Samara again?
Yes.
There's not enough comp set there to count.
No, but the point is really the cost to make, because you guys are really focused on the guest, which is amazing, right? And that's really the success of these loyalty schemes. I'm just trying to take the cost perspective from an owner's side, right? So I don't want to penalize the guests for saying this is a non-qualifying rate. I want to make it easier on the expense side from a P&L perspective.
Yeah, I understand. It gets even harder because, of course, in today's world, you're having a mirror held up to you continually by people like the Points guys. If any of you have seen that online, if you haven't, I'd definitely go and have a look at it because they give you a very hard and fast view of whether they think your loyalty program's any good or not. When you live in that environment and you try and be selective with guests or customers, you can get yourself in hot water.
A couple of questions.
Yes, please.
Sorry, you don't have your hand raised.
Go ahead, you first, and then.
So my question is on these loyalty schemes, because Bani, you brought it up before as well that, of course, it's always a question, where do you burn or where do you spend your points? But from a perspective of the hotelier, the operator, is it desirable for people to spend their points where they have earned them, i.e. in the company, or to spend them outside, like converting them to air miles, converting them to a Starbucks voucher? Because from a consumer perspective, I'm thinking the more choice I have, the better. And in maybe my simple mind, I'm thinking as an operator or as an owner, I have a double whammy. Number one, I pay for the loyalty scheme when people earn, but I also pay in a way when they're burned in my hotel. So what's the most desirable?
Well, the most desirable is obviously for the guests to be staying in our hotels. That is the preferred. The reality is with loyalty programs, not just with IHG, but many businesses, forget the hotel industry for a second. If you have a loyalty program that is pure, just on your product, it tends to lose value. So consequently, if you don't add those options in, then the loyalty program will go on the wane and you will not get the enrollments that you need. And what's interesting when you do the analysis on it, yes, we have quite a few redemption partners across, whether it's kind of, airline, car hire, could even be down to restaurants in local areas and everything else. We still see a large percentage of the redemption in our hotels.
Yes, please.
So I think from the hotel perspective, I worked in loyalty for many years, and I think from the hotel perspective, I think that is a reality is that we're working with perishable inventory. That's going to be given away anyway. You have to pay your head over costs anyway. And in the end of the day, a lot of the redemptions that will take place on rooms that are going to be generating no revenue whatsoever. So I think that that's a point that probably would be interesting to be brought up. But looking at the loyalty program, like you mentioned, the hotels.com, which I'm a member of, because it obviously works, and I think it's cash and it's tax-free, because effectively if I'm traveling all year round, if I'm 200 nights a day, or a year, sorry, on the road, I get 20 of them for my personal holidays in the end, which is great. So I think that the large brands somehow eventually would make sense for some sort of alliance to take place so you guys can actually be competing with Hotels.com, for example. But the question is, what are you guys doing with regards to sustainability? I think with COVID and everything, that everybody realizing we're all connected, I think that there is a big space and a lot of hunger from consumers in general to see when you're traveling and having, obviously an impact in the world. How are you, for example, in IHG, and I'm sure the Red Sea project must have that embedded because you guys are obviously been, let's say, born with this in mind. But I'm curious to see where you guys are going with it.
Well, it's king. COVID's made it even bigger, and I think the trap that some businesses are falling into is greenwashing. So they're making statements and the consumers are going, well, that's all very nice, but what are you actually physically doing? And we see it now an awful lot, not just in corporate guests, but leisure guests as well, that if our hotels are not doing the right thing, they will lose business. It's a fact. At IHG, we have Green Engage, which is a program that we share with our operators to make sure that they're doing everything they should be doing. What we are now trying to do is get a lot more granular. So I'll give you an example. We partner with Winnow, who are the waste management company. We've got 30 hotels across the Middle East, and we can physically prove that we've reduced our waste, and I think it's on average about 68% in those 30 hotels, which is absolutely critical, because making statements that you're there for your people, for communities, for the planet, is not what people want to hear anymore. People want to hear, what are you physically doing, and can you prove that to me?
That's a great, actually, just got an idea. Maybe, the green bathroom, the towel washing should be linked to the reward program.
Yeah.
These apps, you have a lot of apps for steps and recycling, and maybe guests should be incentivized
if
too.
you defer housekeeping, etc.
Yeah,
I think so. I've seen that before.
Really?
Yeah, I've seen it before as well.
Okay, sorry, I'm
But
outdated.
I was and actually the downside
Not
was
many.
that it put a lot of single mothers out of work as cleaning ladies. That was the
All right,
downside.
the world is getting too complicated.
So you raised an interesting question about fighting back. I've always wondered why there haven't been competition challenges to the OTAs. When you can ask for a 20-25% commission in an asset-light industry, that's not a competitive industry. And private citizens can bring competition claims. So I assume that's been thought of. But I remember one of these conferences, and somebody from Expedia said, as a benevolent gesture to our customers, we're going to reduce the rate. Capitalists aren't benevolent. And, we're out of time. Any other questions? Yes.
Actually, building on that, Scott, disrupting, maybe to James, are you guys thinking or actively pursuing, it says the future of loyalty schemes, any strategies around DLT? There are some use cases around winding tree and so forth. So I'm talking about distributed ledger technology, basically taking over the toolkit of the loyalty scheme as such. Are you looking at that at all? Some airlines are working in that space already.
Sorry, can you just clarify the question? Are you talking more about IHG going to a distribution space, or?
Well, you would tokenize your points and run them on a blockchain and have the full distribution in-house.
You are disrupting, because you got me thinking on my feet there. I think we're open to pretty much everything with our loyalty program in terms of what we need to do. It's funny, we do a lot of analysis. Every year we're looking very closely at what we need to do to be the most attractive loyalty program in the world. That's what IHG want to do. We will absolutely look at things as long as, because it always comes back to the same thing, does that mean anything to the guest or the member? Because if it doesn't, or indeed if it starts complicating it, we don't touch it at all. Because we've had some great ideas for some super smart people that we've gone, how do you articulate that to the market? And a global market at that, not an American market, or has to work everywhere. As Bani said, it's one size fits all. We're always going to have that lens on our loyalty program.
The Gen Z will understand. You don't have to educate them.
All right, we're out of time. Let's do one last question. Go ahead.
One last question, non-political one. Loyalty is more down to data, to having clean, actionable data. Who do you believe should own the data? Should it be on the brand side or should it be on the operator side? Do you see that the cost, or you look at the data to make it actionable? What should be on?
Very, very good question, given that the owner is paying for the collection of that data.
Well, the data is co-owned.
But it's not.
It has to be.
It's not.
It has to be.
Most of these, it depends on the operator, but most of them, and they use the GDPR, we have to protect it. But while you're running the hotel,
I'm going to take your side this time.
you owner are liable. But once
No, but
once the
listen,
grant stops,
sorry, I'm going
then-
to take a side. But listen, you cannot run a loyalty program if you don't own the data and crunch it and make it worthwhile for the customer, right?
But when you leave the hotel,
Yeah.
your brand leaves the hotel, I should at least have rights to the people who stayed there. So someone comes back, I don't look, who are you?
Yeah, yeah.
That I recognize him. I appreciate pillow thing, high floor, whatever, but
Yeah.
you should be able to recognize
No.
your prior guests. And if you look at these HMAs today, the operator said, no, that's all ours, other than what is legally required, and that's maybe 5 years of your passport and your name. That's not ability to contact the guest. But there are a couple of the bigger operators that do allow more than that.
Cool.
I think it's just they're not caught up as much, but the
Yeah.
majority, they say it's all ours. All right, I'd like to thank the panel. James, you were a bit of the sounding board.
Okay.
You've been beaten up to, but
You worked me hard.
And to
You worked me hard.
James's credit, he agreed to come on. Several of the other operators did not. So I'd like to thank him for that, and Oliver and Bani. So thank you.
Thank you.